Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and this is the third in a series of candidate roundtable interviews. Chelmsford has its local election on April 1st this year, which is the first Tuesday of the month. That's traditional. We have election for Select Board, Planning Board, Housing Authority, and School Committee, and these are the candidates that we have been talking to. So we've already done the Select Board, we've done the Planning Board, so now you folks, the candidates for Housing Authority, are on the firing line. So what we typically do is we start off with introductions, and we'll start with Judy O'Connor.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for inviting me and for everybody out there. My name's Judy O'Connor, and I've been a resident of Chelmsford for nearly a decade. Previously, I worked for Home Instead Senior Care, and as working with them, I worked one-on-one many times with CNAs and home health aides, and what I did was got to meet many of the people in the community. Unfortunately, it wasn't, shortly after I had worked there, I wound up becoming homeless, something that I never expected in my life. And I was very fortunate that I received assistance from the Chelmsford Housing Authority. They were able to help me secure a home again, which I was very grateful for. And as such, I believe in giving back, and it inspired me to want to do more for the community that I was now being part of. And so I used to, make breakfast for the seniors that lived in Delaney Terrace, where I lived, as well as North Village, and everybody would get together, and a couple of times a month I would make breakfast, and a healthy breakfast. And we all got together, so I got to know many of the people in the community, and I always appreciate being part of a community and being next to the senior center and having the lake across. It's just been really wonderful for me. But unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, I had to stop. Everything stopped, as we know. And shortly after that, they had sent around a notice looking for anybody that might want to be on the board. So I applied. And in 2021, after having applied, I was appointed a board member of the Housing Authority, and I served there for now a little over 3 years. Additionally, I've been involved with the Mel King Institute, the Tenants Union, the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, advocating for increased state funding for the Affordable Care Act. My advocacy efforts included spending 17 long hours at the State House before a panel of representatives. I also returned to the State House to engage with the state representatives individually in promoting the Affordable Care Act. And I'm truly grateful to be part of the Chelmsford community here and to advocate for the town of Chelmsford and its housing authority. Thank you.
Oh, very good. And our next candidate is Rod Cleaves. Rod?
Hi. Thanks, Sam. Rod Cleaves. I've been a resident of Chelmsford for a little over 30 years, so by many people's standards, I'm still a fly-in.
Blow-in is the correct term.
Blow-in, sorry. Sorry.
I don't know, I think maybe I like fly-in better.
Before coming to Chelmsford, I lived in Maynard. And in Maynard, I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we had an ad hoc zoning board, which met from time to time, and I was part of that as well. When I came to Chelmsford, I really didn't get involved right away. When I retired in 2020, I realized I needed to basically get out of my desk chair and start getting involved. So I found myself campaigning for several different positions in town. One of them, when I ran for the Select Board, a theme that came up on a fairly regular basis was, why can't my children who grew up here find a home here, afford a home? And I really didn't have an answer for that. But I kept plugging away and looking into it. And recently I found myself on the Chelmsford Zoning Board of Appeals, and I'm also delivering for the Chelmsford Food Pantry. And one of the things delivering for the food pantry, about half my clients live in authority housing. And I realized just how important it was, and what amazed me, and to be honest with you, it really did amaze me, was how good this housing is. Clean, affordable, accessible, useful. And almost every one of my clients is a woman with children, or maybe a single lady who's retired. And I found it very interesting. And I'm so sorry you found yourself homeless. I was homeless for 2 days. And that was scary enough. But that was in 1977.
Yeah.
So it was a while back. But anyway, I'm, like I said, I'm retired. I'm a disabled veteran, if that means anything to anybody. Very functional, by the way. And basically, I'm running for the Housing Authority because I want to be involved. And that's really the best answer I can give you. The town means a lot to me, and the people in the town mean a lot to me. And so being part of what's going on here, if something doesn't work out with the Housing Authority, I'll find something else. So thanks. We can move on.
Oh, very welcome. And our third candidate is Maura Snow. Maura?
All right. Well, thank you for having us here, Sam and Rod and Judy. Looking forward to talking about the Housing Authority that we all seem to love. It'll be a great conversation. I am Maura Snow. My family, one spouse, 4 sons, and later my mom in a granny flat. We moved to Chelmsford in 1997, quickly became involved with Cub Scouts, Friends of Music, First Parish Church, and the life of the community in general. Halloween's, where we met the neighborhood children, town Christmas tree lightings, kick off the season, 4th of July parade. It has been a great place to live, raise a family, and look forward to retiring. By career, I am a team building consultant in the biotechnology sector. Most of my clients are in Cambridge. But since the pandemic, I've been involved with the helpers at our church, and we do what we can for those among us who may need housing for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're in the earliest stage of their family life, the young people who need a place to live. They perhaps are disabled or have a disabled family member. Sometimes you've had your income significantly reduced, any number of factors, retirement, medical debt. But our helpers at church can't provide housing, but we can provide information about all the services available in Chelmsford, including those provided by the CHA. As a result, I am seeking the opportunity to be part of the solutions that the Chelmsford Housing Authority offers. Low-income housing is no longer developed on its own, but our CHA manages the existing units, assists residents in finding vouchers, placement in the newly built complexes that have the affordability component, like we're seeing so much of, and general guidance for programs for first-time home buyers. A lot of resources coming out of there, and because I rely on those resources, I want to be part of the solution.
Very good. And before we continue with the discussion, I would like to just situate the situation with regard to the office being sought and the candidates. So, Housing Authority, we have 1 seat available, and we have 3 people seeking 1 seat. So you're all vying for that 1 seat. I cannot remember a time in Chelmsford where we've had an actual race on the Housing Authority. It's been many, many years, so this is kind of an interesting situation. And Housing Authority has elected members, and these are 5-year terms, which is something else that isn't common among the other town boards. The other boards are generally a three-year term, but this is a 5-year term. And you have 1 member of your board that is actually a state appointee, so it's a little bit different. You've all done very well introducing yourselves, and actually you've all answered the first question, which is why are you running? I think everybody's got a pretty good idea of why you're seeking the office. So why don't we talk a little bit about how you perceive the role of a local housing authority in general. So under the current structure of state law and the Chelmsford bylaws, and I'd like to have each one of you address how you feel what you feel the role is, and then perhaps we can get into how effective you think it's been in Chelmsford. So we'll start at the other end of the table now. Maura, you're up.
All right. So the role is an interesting role because it's strictly advisory. Other town boards have ultimate report in through the town manager, whereas the Housing Authority is funded by the state. It's funded by federal grants. There's also the Choice Program, a nonprofit that can donate to the Housing Authority. And because of that, that requires the recipients of the state grants that they get are required to have a board that includes elected members from the community where the board is located, plus a state-appointed representative and a resident representative, and that's where Judy has been, which is awesome. So in terms of how they operate, it's a chance to get in and just do some advisory work. I work in similar capacities for actually Chelmsford Telemedia. I've been on the board for some time, and also the Center for the Arts. I'm appointed by the Select Board to be an advisor to the Center for the Arts. So arts are important. I have good experience with understanding the grant writing process, and I think a lot of what the Housing Authority does and what their director, David Hedison, does extremely well is knowing where the grants are, knowing how to apply for them. So as a person working in the biotech industry, I've helped client companies get grants when they're moving into new communities, and sometimes there's tax exemptions that they can get. And then my own business is supported by the state of Massachusetts because companies apply for grants and they use those grants to pay me to do training. So I have that familiarity. I feel like the functioning is very different from other boards. I ran for planning board previously, as I mentioned. I did lose by 50 votes, so that was good. But I am fascinated by the idea of bringing housing to Chelmsford in a way that is sustainable and supported by the whole community.
Good enough. Judy.
Well, the Housing Authority in Chelmsford operates under clear state and federal guidelines. It consists of 5 members, as you know, 3 elected for 5-year terms, 1 appointed by the governor, and 1 resident, which you already stated. While Chelmsford Housing is local, there are also Section 8 vouchers managed by the Chelmsford Housing Authority. They're applied statewide, and state public housing renovation programs extend across 60 housing authorities. That means board members' responsibilities actually go beyond Chelmsford itself. I would rate the board's historical performance overall on specific issues. The historical performance in public housing accommodations, the program administration has been proactive and forward-thinking, particularly in securing funding and initiating major redevelopment projects. McFarland Manor, the main office site, housing 50 residents, was awarded $15 million for a complete overhaul, making it one of the few developments to receive such a substantial funding. Similarly, Johnson Area Home is to 64 residents is undergoing a significant transformation, expanding to 96 units, which reflects the board's commitment to addressing the house needs through strategic.
That's the Smith Street
That's the
property.
Smith Street
right.
property, correct. The board has played a key role in setting policies, planning a vision for long-term public housing with improvements demonstrating steady growth to meet the community needs. However, despite these efforts, the broader challenge still remains significant. Statewide public housing needs to exceed $8 billion, yet funding allocations remain disproportionately low. Although recent legislation actions may allocate $1 billion over the next 5 years, this still falls short, covering less than 20 cents for every dollar needed to repair the maintain public housing. Overall, while the board has made substantial progress in securing funding for specific projects and expanding housing capacity, the systematic funding gap continues to pose a major challenge in fully meeting the policy needs. And we haven't, we have not built anything new in Chelmsford.
Not since
It's
the
just
1980s.
since the late 1980s. So all of these buildings do need
That
to
was
be repaired.
was that Delaney?
Yes.
Yes, I remember
Yes.
when that was. Has it
And-
been that long?
Yes. And to be honest, I've seen, how unfortunate it is that many of, when they closed down McFarland Building, they wound up having to open up spaces like at Delaney and all these other buildings so that they could move these people into them. So there was, basically it was empty apartments for a while until they could get everybody moved out of that building so that they can renovate McFarland. And my own sister became homeless, and she was living in her car, and she would every now and then come by my apartment just to take a shower, and she would get to know some of the people, and she would talk with everybody. She's like me, a talker, so she had found out that there was several apartments vacant, and she couldn't understand. And I had to explain to her that the reason being we don't have we have to repair these buildings that desperately, even our Delaney, where I live, we've just been granted money. Fortunately, David's very good at getting grants.
Yes.
And we are going to be putting in new siding, new windows, and a roof. And I had petitioned the building to get new windows because when you open up your windows, they will slam shut on you. And the tops don't go up, so you have to put a stick in them in the wintertime so that the top doesn't come down. So, and like I said, it's very frustrating when you see how old these buildings are, how much work needs to be done to repair them, and that's why I fight so hard for the Affordable Care Act and to get more money and more funding just to repair and maintain these buildings that we already have. But I would love to see, and that's like you said, I've seen the plans for Smith Street and they look awesome.
They do.
So I'm very excited about that.
Rodney?
Well, I haven't seen the plans for Smith Street, but I'd look forward to seeing that. Part of your question, if I recall,
Go ahead.
was how we dovetail with state mandates. If I
Yes, go ahead.
picked up on that, right?
Expand on
Well,
that.
I mean, those are things, unfortunately, we have to do. Like, for example, I was against the MBTA corridor mandate. I thought there was a better way to
You and
handle
90% of the town.
it. Well, we still voted for it.
Well, you had to because it's a mandate.
Exactly.
Nobody recommends that we break the law.
Nobody wanted to fight it.
Exactly.
Like some of the other towns. But nonetheless, I'm familiar with Delaney. I've got one of my clients
It's
lives
over there.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I didn't see the problems you talked about, but I only get as far as the front door. And I gotta be honest with you, both Judy and Maura outclassed me on answering this question because I'm not steeped in the authority like they are. And so I have to admit to that. I expect to be with a 5-year term. It's something I plan to jump into with both feet and get fully immersed. But as far as the anticipation of what the authority can do faced with the state mandates, David has written some good grants, and I've been involved with grants. I used to work at the Veterans Administration, where grant writing was part of our job, and so that's something that I can do and I can help out with. The idea that, well, I'm just gonna basically stop there, Sam.
Okay. Let me just follow up on something you said, because I think it's important. First of all, don't beat yourself up
I'm not.
for not being steeped in the history of the Housing Authority, okay? And it's good that we have candidates who are knowledgeable. But first of all, thank you for your honesty, because that doesn't happen too often with politicians, all right? So
Don't have much choice.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it, because many of them will they'll flubber their way through the answer one way or the other, and usually people can figure it out. So thank you for that. And secondly, sometimes a board or a commission will benefit by having somebody come in who isn't steeped in the operations, because it's fresh eyes.
Well, that's my goal, is to bring fresh eyes to the point of view, having worked in several areas that complement the Housing Authority, and that's basically why I'm running. having been on the Zoning Board of Appeals and working with the 40B initiative so often, it gave me a real steep appreciation for what the authority does. And frankly, when I saw the openings, I didn't think I'd be running opposed, to be honest with you.
And that was not a bad assumption to make, really.
Yeah.
I mean, given the history of the office, yes.
Yeah, you guys took out your papers at the last minute.
Oh, they did? Oh, okay. Well, that's all right.
That's okay.
It's funny because we've touched. Obviously, we're talking about housing and affordable housing and so forth, and the conversation has hit upon 40Bs, which is a different animal in public housing. Although people do confuse them, and I understand why. And you talked a little bit about the MBTA zoning. So what that all says is there is a housing shortage in the state.
Yes.
Okay, and at whatever level you wanted to ascribe to that. So do you folks have any thoughts as to how the housing authority, obviously Chelmsford, but the other housing authorities, because every town is required to have one,
Right.
how can the housing authorities advocate better, or do you think the housing authorities should be advocating generally for increased housing availability and more specifically lower income availability? Do you think that's a proper role for the housing authorities to advocate in that area?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Absolutely.
I think part of
How would
being a
you
member-
do that?
Well, part of being a member on the authority, if I may, is to be accessible. Let people know you're there and you're willing to listen to them and talk to them. Sometimes you can't help, and sometimes you can give them a direction to go to. So, yeah, I think the real reason, I mean, when it comes right down to it, for all the fluff, the housing authority is there to find affordable housing and to help people out. Without that, without anything else that goes above that, it's just a useless authority.
Yeah, I think.
Any thoughts?
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
we had talked about the mandates that have come up from the MBTA Communities
Right.
Act that there be affordable housing, and we don't want to lose state funding, and we don't want to break the law. Our planning board, I felt, did a wonderful job of finding a way for Chelmsford to comply with that could be as comfortable for Chelmsford as it could be under the circumstances, and how things would be laid out, particularly with the addition of accessory dwelling units that, if you have a lot of a certain size, you can build a 900 square foot or less separate building on your property if you want to. No one's going to make you do it. But anyway, all the discussions around that through the planning board, I noticed I felt they were handled well. There was a lot of disputes there, but our planning board gets a lot of work done that it needs to do.
They also get a lot of bad raps.
They do that they don't deserve. However,
They did about as well as you could do with something that
agree.
is
Yeah.
something that is handed to you.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went circling around to that and the planning board's influence. I was following the planning board for a while when there was on Turnpike Road, and there's a few apartments there, and there's a housing development they're called condos, but they're separate tall houses.
Oh, I know what you're talking
Nice
about.
neighborhood of houses, Stonegate. And right on Turnpike, in front of Stonegate, there was a couple of houses that were up for sale, and one of them had sold to a developer. There was like one house, but I think it was close to an acre lot. It sold to a developer who was going to put 6 houses right there. Those 6 houses sit there now. They look great. They're nice little starter houses, and the sort of thing that I think, yes, I wish those were available for my kids. But
I
at
think
the
that was a 40B project.
might have been.
It was.
Yeah.
It
yeah.
was. A lot of people opposed that.
Right, exactly. And where I feel like if the housing authority could get in front of and get good people like Judy to the planning board meetings, because everyone who spoke at the planning board meetings related to that lived in Stonegate and was really worried about those 6 little houses going in right next to them, right smack in their backyards. and they just didn't like it, and they loved their community and had concerns for what that was going to be, and they totally get that. That's their right to step forward. But I didn't hear one person who needed housing speak up. There was just nobody who needed it. If they didn't know, generally, if you need housing, you are not in a position to stop everything and go to a planning board meeting. But maybe if the housing authority could support the people who would like to step in and speak, so that what the planning board is hearing is both sides, right? Here's why I need a house there. And no, I'm not going to wreck the neighborhood behind me.
And I can't
just to
think-
get another voice out there.
And I can't think of any.
That's a great idea.
I can't think of any legal or conflict of interest rule that would prohibit you from doing that as a member or as a representative of a housing authority.
Right.
I think that's a good idea, and you're right, because there's so much. Whenever you get, 40B is extremely controversial, has been. The law's been on the books since 1969. It's morphed 4 or 5 times away from what it was originally intended to do. And it creates an awful lot of controversy and heartburn. I don't find that to be so true with the public housing projects. I mean, they're not without controversy. There was controversy around Delaney. We had controversy around the units on, I can't think of the name of the project now, on Littleton Road. You know where I'm talking about. Just name escapes me for the moment. But you all, and again, it's the abutters' fear of the unknown. No one likes change, or very few people like change. Okay, and my perspective, and I'm going to throw this out. You guys, I want you to comment on it. I've been in town 46 years, and the town looks a lot different now than it did when I first moved in. Almost every project, whether it be housing or whether it be a commercial development, they're always opposed by abutters, residents in general, what it is. And in my experience, all of the bad things that people say are going to happen almost never happen, or they happen only slightly. Okay, the biggest thing is traffic. Every time you get a project, the traffic is going to kill us. This is what they said about the, and of course this isn't affordable housing, but the Grist Mill project in the center of town. And you know, I stood up in the planning board meeting and I said, well, you know what, I would agree with you. I said, if everybody at Grist Mill got in their car at 8 o'clock in the morning and all left at the same time, I would agree with you. But that is not going to happen, because 3/4 of those people are retired, all right? And the people that have to leave for work, it isn't going to be that much of an impact. And I remember they just kind of looked at me and thought, gee, that's right. Not everybody gets in their car and leaves at the same time, and not everybody comes home at the same time. And really, there hasn't been traffic impact because of Grist Mill. It just hasn't happened, okay?
Very little impact.
Yeah, very, very, very little impact. So
I'm one of the ones that were opposed to that.
Well, yes, and many were opposed, and that's fine, and I get it. Turns out I think it's been a good project. So but that's housing on the scale size, okay? We're talking about, I'm just using that as an example of project impact or potential impact, but we're talking about housing on the lower economic scale. And I find there's been very little objection comparatively when a public housing project has been advocated. There's always some, as we said, but I find that the Chelmsford residents are generally pretty supportive of the public housing. So this brings me to my next question, which is your executive director, Dave Hedison, okay, who's been in the job. Do you know how long he's had the job?
38 years, I believe.
Is it that long?
It's been a fair amount of time, I know that.
It's 38.
Oh boy, do I feel old.
30 years, sorry.
Yeah,
no,
30, that's bad
30
enough.
years. And, you know, he's held in very high esteem amongst every, you know, even these groups that I've been involved with. He's been to the State House with me. You know, he got to speak sooner than I did, but he didn't have to wait 17 hours. But he's a huge advocate for more housing, for more affordability, more. And I'm also involved in, and this has nothing to do with the board, to be honest, but I'm also involved with being a judge for some of the colleges here in Massachusetts and southern New Hampshire for, sustainable, affordable, and environmentally friendly homes that are being renovated and built throughout Massachusetts. The college students are drawing up plans, and I get to look at them. And I've seen some amazing things that they have done with these plans to build these homes.
Yeah.
Are these
And
generally architectural students?
they're architectural students, and and I get to judge them, and we get to go. And I did this last year, and I just enjoyed it so much in seeing what they came up with, and how great it would be to see some of that coming here. And being developed, and that's what I would really like to see. I mean, even myself, being at Delaney Terrace, I suggested, I said, look, I think that we should have raised beds, so that we can grow vegetables. And, there is a food shortage. There is, aside from being homeless, everybody's struggling to make ends meet and to get food. So I thought it would be a great idea to, and that's worked out really well. And David was all for that. But I would like to see more of that. I would like to see, and I agree with you about, I think it would be a great idea to be involved more with the town planning and have more cohesive relationship and in that. But also, just to go back to, we have nothing to do with the MBTA.
Right.
Absolutely
Right.
nothing.
Yeah.
No,
so
that's a zoning issue.
issue.
That's a
That's
zoning
not-
issue,
Right. But when it comes to the housing authority, there's nothing.
No,
we can-
but if the MBT, if part of that includes, like when we build apartments like the ones that were most recently built at the end of Turnpike where it's closer
Right.
to 129, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's some lovely apartments, and when they were built, a certain percentage of them had to be affordable.
That's a 40B project.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So,
Which Rod would know all about being on the zoning
I
board.
wouldn't know all about
Okay,
it.
yeah,
but
you're probably the
I'd
better
have
person.
I'd have a handle on it.
but I feel like that's where the housing authority can step in and make sure, is that really affordable? Is
Right.
that going there? And then at some point, don't we, once we hit 10% affordability, we're no longer
Required.
required.
Yeah,
But shouldn't we maintain that? When we talk about what is Chelmsford, when I moved in here, I was talking about, seeing children on Halloween, and I just
Right.
looked at the statistics. There are 600 less school-age children from preschool to senior in high school, 600 less now than there were in '02. '02 was the earliest I could find. And I
didn't
thought,
know that.
is that because young family, and I don't know why,
Right.
but I looked it up to see, because I take notes on Halloween. When we first moved here, I was upwards of 45, 50 kids. I'm in South Chelmsford in one of the Campanelli developments that are everywhere in town. And
I live in a Campanelli.
all right then, me too. I'm in a raised ranch.
Do you still have the radiant heat?
I do not.
No, I don't either.
No, I have central heat and air from the same equipment. Works very nicely. But when we first came, I was upwards of 50 kids at Halloween, then down to 30, and this past Halloween, I think I had 25. So, I don't know. Is that just my neighborhood? And so I looked it up. So I feel like, is that because we're unable to bring young families in, or is that just normal demographics because the country is aging? I don't know, but I looked it up and I thought, wow, that's a 600
That's a good
kid
point.
loss.
The
That's a good point.
town,
I've seen
the
the
town
same
in general, I think, since that time has become more unaffordable
Yeah,
It has.
for younger people.
Yeah.
And it isn't just Chelmsford.
right.
all across.
We're not as bad as Concord or Bedford or Lexington, where I can't even afford to drive through those towns. Okay, never mind live in them.
Yeah.
But since I've been in town, I came in '79, and I've seen a difference in the demographic.
Yeah.
And what really distresses me is when I see the smaller starter homes being torn down
Yeah.
Yes.
and these huge houses being built. Now, I mean, I'm very libertarian in a lot of my views, and I support property rights fully, and I don't get upset with people who do that. I just wish it wasn't happening. Okay,
Yeah,
I'd rather see the town maintain a stock of so-called affordable situations. Getting back to the 40B, and I don't know if it's still true or not, but Dave Hedison, who's the executive director of Housing Authority, as we said, for a while when the town was doing its 40B projects in earnest, and I was on the select board at the time, 20 years ago, and we did a lot of so-called local initiative 40Bs, because those come before the select board for review before they get to the zoning board of appeals.
yeah.
And Dave Hedison functioned as the monitoring agent, because you were right, Maura, their state has very strict rules as to the amount of profitability that a developer can ultimately take out of a 40B project. It used to be 20%. I don't know what it is
It's
today.
much less now.
Is it much less now? Okay. So it behooves the town to actually monitor that process as the units are being built, and then
Right.
they're let out and so forth. And in one case, and I forget the project, but Dave was actually able to recoup, it was a couple $100,000 for the town. And I don't remember which project it was. It was a long time ago.
If I could interrupt, and Judy
Yeah.
could probably confirm this, I don't think that monitoring that you mentioned falls under the authority, does it?
No, it doesn't.
I don't think
It
it
doesn't.
does,
No,
no.
that's not a statutory requirement for the
No.
housing authority. But this is something, to your point, Judy, the executive director that you folks have is a community-focused person. He's not just totally involved with housing authority,
Right.
but he looks out towards the housing is his thing.
Right.
Right.
It's not just
Yes.
limited to public housing.
Right.
So the town, we were able to use him for many years. I don't know if he is still, well, we haven't really had any 40B projects of consequence lately, but when that was happening, Dave performed that function. So that's an example of, we have a person in the form of an executive director
Yeah.
who went beyond his role in the housing authority.
Yeah.
So, and we talked a little while ago about the board itself doing some outreach, and I mean, I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Because this has always been a hot button for me. It was 20 years ago when I ran for the select board. One of my things was, we need to address senior housing,
Yeah.
both public and affordable. Because, to your point, what are we going to do when we are retired and our incomes are limited?
Yeah, yeah.
We want to stay in town.
Yeah.
You know,
that's-
I do. I don't want to go. I'm too lazy to move. I want to.
My stuff is here.
Yeah,
It's a
I want to
beautiful
stay in
town. It's a
town.
beautiful
My wife looked around our house and said, "We're not moving all this," you know.
Yeah.
so-
Yeah, I think most of us can relate to that.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so I think we've discussed that pretty well. I don't know. I don't really know what other kinds of initiatives the board could take. You know, you talked about showing up at a planning board hearing and giving the other side of the story. I think
Right.
that's great. I don't think I've ever seen that done.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
I think that would be a great idea. I think
Yeah.
that to have a more symbiotic relationship between the departments certainly helps all of Chelmsford. I don't see any negative aspect to that.
What I see too, the housing authority and David bringing, not just Chelmsford.
Right.
He has regional authority. I think we're one of 3 regional
Yes.
centers that oversee the housing boards of other communities, which I find, going back to my initial statement, with people who live in Chelmsford, they go to church in Chelmsford, and I'm one of the people that looks around and says, oh my gosh, how can we help so-and-so when it comes to our attention? And so, but we can look in Billerica and Westford and other towns, and the housing authority has, housing there
Yeah.
that they can access.
Oh, you
so
have choice,
we'd love to
too.
keep. People love to stay in
Right.
Chelmsford, but you need a place. You need a place,
Right.
and our housing authority it's
Right.
a big deal. I think David brings in $1 million a year from managing the regional. There's 3 cities that manage a regional area, and Chelmsford has what from
Right.
Boston to Worcester, or
Right.
whatever. I don't know
Well,
where it is
just
on the
about
map,
all the
but it's-
surrounding towns.
Right, yeah.
Right.
So they each have their own housing authority, but those are limited and don't have the, most of the grants
You
that
can-
go to the vouchers.
They don't even know how to go for the grants.
You
And
can
I've
thank-
talked to many of the people, like I said,
Right.
when I've gone to some of these groups, meetings, we've with the Tenants Association and things like that. They can tell you some real horror stories. And every year I get the book, and David's always been in compliance, always.
Yeah.
I mean, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
In any of, and like I said, he goes above and beyond, in my opinion, and he's so proactive, and that's what I love about being with David and being here. Chelmsford is such a wonderful town. I feel safe. I feel part of the community, and I think that's important to be. And that's why I like to give back, and that's why I applied for being on the board, and why I'm running now.
Yeah, I like what you said. I mean, you could walk downtown at 2 in the morning
Yes.
and feel safe.
Safe. Yeah.
You know, and that's something that, well, I mean, many of the surrounding towns probably similar, but you're certainly not going to feel that in Worcester.
No. Well, or out in Springfield or in West.
No.
There are a lot of places, and I've lived in a lot of places that.
You know, I lived in Maynard for 17 years, and you know, I loved Maynard, but you know, we didn't always feel safe in Maynard.
Yeah.
That's this little town. But
Yeah, that is a small town.
I wanted to mention to you, I think several years ago we would have 25, 30 kids on Halloween. I think last year we had about 5. So it's just, I think it's just the nature of our neighborhood. But yeah, I mean, it's tangential to what we've all talked about. Most of the people that have bought houses in my neighborhood, I live in East Chelmsford. I live in a little neighborhood that everybody thinks is Lowell. So we're right on the line. But almost everybody that's bought a house in my neighborhood have no children, or very little children, maybe. That
Younger
getting
people?
to start a house.
Or
Yeah.
older people?
No, you know, I think the last couple of people that I know of that moved into my neighborhood, one was a retired Army officer. One was, I don't want to get too involved, but you know, one was a lottery winner and was able to afford coming in. But a lot of the people just don't, I mean, they can't afford to live in this town, and it kills me. You know, and to what you were saying earlier, Sam, I don't understand why the developers, and I think the authority could probably do something about this, can't build a nice starter home, you know, for starter money.
Right, like the ones on Turnpike.
Like the ones
Right?
on Turnpike,
they're adorable.
Yeah, and you know, like I said, I was opposed to that. And then I saw what they ended up with.
Yeah,
and you know, not so bad.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the problem is, as you know, Chelmsford is largely built out, so we have a land problem.
We
okay?
do.
And this is a problem for the housing authority.
Yeah.
Okay, and one of the things in talking to David, he is always on the lookout for land. Okay, because that's the first thing, and your 40B project is only economic for the developer if he can increase density over what the zoning allows. So you have
absolutely.
so you have a half acre on Turnpike. I think it's 2-family zoning, so it's a half acre minimum, and he puts 6 units on there. Well, you can't do that under the zoning laws. You can only do it under the 40B
That's true.
exemption. So that's a problem. But the land issue, I think, in Chelmsford is a real problem for the housing authority. So do any of you know, and again, it's been a long time since I've been plugged into it, but the waiting list for public housing,
It's 3 to 7 years.
Yeah.
is it that much now?
Yeah.
3 to 7 years. And correct me if I'm wrong, Maura, I think you said we can't, as a Chelmsford Housing Authority, we can't discriminate and limit that to Chelmsford people. Is that correct? If people from other towns apply, they go on the list too? Is that right?
The priority, number one priority is veterans.
Yes, okay,
Right.
right.
And
Right.
after that goes local, though, as I understand it.
It's
So there's
also
a-
local,
there's-
but also we do accept from other outside
Right.
places. And then there are times like, you know, there's a little house on Sheila Ave there that, you know, that we had to put a lot of energy, money into to get that up and running again, and we weren't allowed to build anything big. It would have been better to have torn that down and built
Yeah.
something with more units.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the zoning would not allow us to do that. But, so we renovated it, and I found that it's, you know, those are, we couldn't get anybody locally who wanted to move in there that would fit the description to live in that place, because it is for handicapped.
Yeah.
So, you know, we went as far as, I think they were looking in Boston, and we tried Lowell, but there were people who didn't want to travel out this way because, you know, if you're coming from Boston and you might work in Boston or you have family in Boston, then they're not going to want to come here. And it took us a while to actually be able to rent it out. So I was surprised at that.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Going back to what you said a moment ago, I'm of two minds about one thing. I'm a big fan of open space.
Yeah.
You know, farmland, any kind of open space. But you're right, we are built up, and that is something we need to be mindful of. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, how much buildable land we actually have anymore.
Yeah.
Well, raw land that has no improvements on it.
Right.
You're right, and we've got, I don't know how many acres. I think I forget now, but over the years, the town has made a concerted effort to take open land and put it into some form of protection, whether
Right,
it's
receivership,
conservation
yeah,
or so
right.
forth. But most of that land would not be buildable. I mean,
Most of it's, agricultural
right.
trust.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, the most recent one, which was the coolest farm, I forget how many acres it was,
Yeah.
Right.
but only a small portion of that
Yeah.
would have been developable. Okay,
Correct.
So, you know, but we're facing that, and I know, again, as I said, David is always on the lookout.
There's a lot of people that
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that still want Chelmsford to be the provincial small town that they
Quintessential
moved
town.
into.
You see that on Facebook a lot, don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah, and there's a lot of me that agrees with that.
Yeah.
I mean, when I lived in Maynard, the best way for me to get to Maine, where my family was to come up Route 27 and come into what is now where the Adams Library is, and I made a left-hand turn on Route 4 to get up to 495.
Can't do that now.
No. And one day I came up and I had to make a right, and I didn't know where I was going. And I noticed that seemed to be when Chelmsford started losing. I mean, when I first came through here, there were still cows where Marshall's is. And, and people want to go back to that. And I would love to, but it just isn't realistic.
No, it isn't. It isn't.
And
That's the point. So the housing authority, part of its mission, I think, is to fit into the community
Right.
somehow. The way they
Yes.
develop,
Yeah.
not to the extent that the planning board is charged with
Right,
the
right.
responsibility of that. But and if you look at the developments, if you look at Delaney's a good example. And I remember when that was built, and David asked if I would like to go over and take a look, and
Yeah.
sure. And I was very impressed.
Yeah.
To the point where I said, I wouldn't mind living here.
Exactly.
Okay,
It's like the
and-
location on
That's-
110.
that's what
You
I
don't know
found
that's
in
public
almost every
housing.
place
You
I
don't know that's public housing.
Well,
It's
and
beautiful.
that's exactly that's the point. I mean,
Right.
that's the way these units are developed. And I'm very
Yeah.
I'm very excited for the Smith Street.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it's going to look like $1 million. All right, and secondly, you're going to add 32 units of housing, which
Right.
are desperately needed. Am I wrong?
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
It's
you
going
know,
to be there.
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah, it's going to be great, and the amenities will be there for folks.
Yeah.
And that's going to be now, what's going on with McFarland?
McFarland is still in the process of not completed yet, but I do believe we're going to be, they've increased a couple of places for McFarland. Let me see.
Yeah,
They're going to go to 96, I think they were 96, 64 residents in the process of being completely redeveloped into 96. Are getting a large
I think
portion
that's
of the
Smith
road.
Street, isn't it?
That's, no, that's.
Oh, was that
I
McFarland?
think so.
No, that
Okay.
is- No, I'm sorry,
it
you're right,
Smith?
it is
I think
Smith
I'm in
Street.
Yeah, I thought that was
McFarland is
Smith.
50, and
It's
well,
going
that's going to
for
be
it.
completed in the next few months.
50
but
units.
They're going to end up with
50?
64,
It's
right?
50 residents, so
Yeah,
I
okay.
thought that they were going to be increasing that too.
Yeah. It's going to look nice, too. I mean,
Oh, yes, it
you know,
will,
just
right.
The looks are important. Another
Right.
thing I wonder about with getting more housing, what about some of the unused business sites that used
Exactly.
to be, along
Well, this is what
129?
McFarland is, used to be a school. So we're
Right.
talking
Right.
about
Right.
adaptive reuse
Right.
Yes,
of
exactly.
existing
Those
facilities.
are up to the developers,
Yeah.
what they want to do.
Well, that's
But
true.
I'm
Yeah.
just, I'm,
Right.
more pie in the sky
Yeah.
brainstorming here.
Right.
But I think that's a lot of what they're talking about in the financial district in Boston. So many people can work from home, and it does make sense for them to do so. And so there's all this real estate sitting empty that perhaps could be redeveloped. Now, the other concern that definitely came up when I was with the Friends of Music, we relied on everybody in all of those businesses to. They made donations, and they collected bottles and cans for the bottle and can drive. We could just go down the street, pick up bottles and cans, and bring them over, and they're a better tax base than homeowners.
Right.
So, you hate to throw, I don't want there to be not a business tax base, but how long have they been sitting open, and how hard would it be to renovate them?
that.
So, and I don't know the answer to that, but that's the sort of thing I'm hoping the board can look at and ask questions about. And my other thing that I wonder, like with something like Smith Street, are we limited in how high we can build it? Because with so little land, where are places
Yes,
we can
we are.
build up?
Yeah.
Can we go 10 stories with an elevator? Yeah.
I think it's
think it's
45, is it 45 feet? So
think
you're
Right, that
doing
works
like
out to
3.5
about
stories, I
Three
think.
stories,
Yeah.
yeah.
What if you could go
So
to
they
10?
are limited. I know.
Well,
I know.
Again,
Yeah.
Well, that
it's
a little
blue
bit
sky
much,
thinking.
but
I think
It's blue
you're
sky
really
thinking.
pushing the
Yeah,
envelope
no,
on that one.
I know, but that's
but it would be nice.
Try
if
for
they
4 first.
right. Well, no, I'm going to say 10 and then work my way down.
Okay,
to
so you're a negotiator. All right. you're a
Start high
negotiator.
and work
Exactly.
low.
There you
could-
go.
There you go.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I'm excited about that. And McFarland, I think, is a good example. An old school building.
We
And
saw the elevation.
I've been in those
Oh,
units,
it's gonna be
not recently, but again, those are. I wouldn't mind living there.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean that's the way I look at it. And
Yeah.
so given the pressure that we face, though, in trying to create public housing and affordable housing within Chelmsford, I mean, other than what you just said, maybe the potential of renovating some existing structures. I'm not sure the 129 area, to Rod's point, from an economic development standpoint, would
Right.
lend itself to that, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you have to have people that are willing to come in and invest their own money,
Oh, yeah.
buy the land,
Right.
Yeah,
you know,
was
and
it
navigate the process.
275 that they
Yeah.
just demolished, or 273? Yeah, nobody's going to want to live there, realistically.
That area has been, really since the late 90s, that's really been designated as an economic development zone. So what's
Right.
going to...
And we need the economic
Yeah.
development. But again, just
Right.
the mill and 3 housing is right there.
That's true.
It sits there and it's
Yeah.
full and it's nice, and there's kids waiting for the bus. I've seen
And-
them. I don't know if they go trick or treating.
And Lowell has done it. You know, they've
Send 'em over.
they've converted a lot of their old buildings into
Right.
housing.
I think some of these mill renovations
Yeah.
are
Oh,
yeah, those are
fabulous,
right.
absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we have that university property out North Chelmsford Way.
On
I'm
Princeton?
not as familiar with it as
Off
I'd like
Princeton
to
Street, is that
And again, that's a 40B development.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
it
so
is.
you're looking at roughly 400 units there.
Right.
So that's a big
a little
one.
less, but
Yeah,
about
I think it's
350.
390.
Oh, I thought it was about 350.
Well, you might be right, okay, but
We had to look at that.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot, to the extent that they had to put in their own sewage treatment.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the
Right.
That's
sewer capacity.
That's a good point. The biggest problem we have in Chelmsford, frankly, is water and sewer.
Infrastructure, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so, we have to struggle with that. I mean, we capped it at a certain point, and we're already over that cap. We defined a particular point as 100% capacity, and we're already like at 105 what we can send to Lowell. And we got to find a way to.
But there's an argument for adaptive reuse, because if you have an existing facility, it's already cataloged in sewer output, okay?
Well, yeah.
So it wouldn't be a total gross add. You'd have to net some of that, right?
Yeah.
So,
There's also
yeah.
credits that they can purchase. I mean, if they go to a development, say in North Chelmsford, and everybody converts their toilets, for example, and their shower heads and whatnot to low capacity, then those are credits that can be reused for new development. But nobody's doing that I'm
But
aware of.
I'll bet you if the three of you sat down and talked to David, he'd say, been there, done that.
Right.
I mean, he's.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm sure he has.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
he's
Yeah.
thought of all of these
Yes.
different things. At one point, they had a proposal for housing for the Chelmsford Center for the Arts building, the old town hall.
Right, yeah.
That was something that David had initially worked upon,
Yeah.
and then that just it wasn't practical. It turned out in the end, but I mean, so that's out of the box
Right,
thinking.
you have to be,
right?
you have to be out there.
And you know, you look at that. Okay, so this is something that the Housing Authority was pursuing, and regardless of how you felt about whether that was a proper use for the building, it made sense from the standpoint of location, because the lower income situations are probably, from the standpoint of residents, are better located in center areas, more dense areas.
Exactly.
Areas, and again, getting back to the MBTA zoning,
Right, I mean, that's
okay.
the whole point. You want to
Build-
be near the bus stop.
Build it on the bus
Walking
stop
distance.
line or the
Right,
train
yeah,
line,
absolutely. Yeah.
okay? I mean, that kind of thing makes sense. So that always should go into the thinking,
Right.
you know, of you know, when you're talking about developing
Right.
housing. So anyway, well, I think we've had a very good discussion here. We've got 3 candidates, again, running for 1 seat. So do any of you folks have any campaign activities planned? I mean, are you all going to aggressively campaign for this seat, or have we not thought about that?
I already signed the paper that said I'm not spending any money.
Are you
So-
going to buy a couple of signs and, no?
Nope. I
Okay.
hope, you know, forums like this and
Yeah.
just going around meeting people. And
Yeah, exactly.
Plus, everybody I deliver to for the food pantry, I'm, you know,
Yeah,
telling
sure.
them, you know,
So
So,
Saturday out in the center of town, hold up a little sign.
you won't
Vote
see
for Judy, vote for Maura, vote for Rod, right? So
Probably not.
I may have some, I'm still,
I don't
I
know.
don't have my signs yet. I did
Okay.
design a postcard.
Excellent.
That basically just says,
a mailer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I'm just, you know, I'm picking up the cost for that, and I'll record it appropriately.
Well, I look
with the
forward to
town,
getting
so
one.
I'll put you on the list.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I may mail out some of those. I may just, you know, see who strategically wants to deliver them door to door. Because it is, you know, gets a little pricey.
Yeah,
The
I'm
stamps and all
doing,
the rest of it, but
I'm
yeah.
doing strictly door-to-door handshaking.
Yeah.
You know, and, yeah, I've
Well,
had.
that's time tested.
It is. I mean, but you know, I mean,
kind of where I'm at,
I mean, you know, I've run for several offices here. I seem to be the proverbial candidate, and I've had my fill of, you know, sending stuff out. And
Yeah.
It's a lot of
putting
work,
signs
isn't it?
up, yes.
Yeah, this is my second
I know,
one,
when I-
and you know, I'm familiar with it as well. I
I
feel
mean-
like this forum is great. You know, my piece is, hey, we all want to be of service here. Up to
Well,
the
that's,
Well,
exactly,
that's the point.
That's exactly right.
That's
Yeah,
the point
exactly
for me. I just want to
Yeah.
be involved.
Right,
I
yeah.
mean, a few years ago, I ran for state rep, and that really took a lot of the stuffing out of me, to be honest with you.
Some would say you're a masochist. Running as a Republican in this part of the
I am.
state,
Yes, I am.
you have a death
Well,
wish, my
it's a
friend.
blood sport.
Yes, it certainly is.
Being a Republican in Massachusetts is a blood sport.
We've got about a minute to go, so I'm going to give each of you a chance to look into the camera, which, I don't know, which camera are we looking at? I don't even know with
Looks
this,
like that one.
with this 3-cam system.
That
Is
one
it
has
the
a
one
red
in
light.
The floor manager is telling me it's the one with the red light, so
All right.
that makes perfect sense. So look into the camera and wrap up your little electoral spiel and ask for the vote, because my experience is people like to be asked
Yes.
for the vote.
They
And if you don't ask them, they may not vote for you.
Yeah.
So, Judy,
Well, I would, I'm running as an elected official this time, and I would really like your vote. I feel that I've done a lot of good in the last 3 years, and I'd like to continue to do that. Thank you.
very good. Rod?
Well, Rod Cleaves, I would like your vote. I'd like to be on the Housing Authority, primarily because I just need to be involved. That's all there is to it. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think the Housing Authority has been very good. It's a well-run organization, and Judy's part of that.
Okay. Maura,
Maura Snow,
15 seconds, go.
Ask for your vote. I'm an interested outsider who loves the work that they do and wants to help them continue based on my own experience. Thank you. Come vote for Maura.
Okay, there you go. There's a passionate appeal. We're out of time. Thank you very much to the candidates.